Good morning and welcome to the Resident Podcast. We're live.
Hello, good morning. Nice to see you both.
Great to see you, Chris. We've got Chris Graeme joining us from Essential Business, part of the Open Media Group here. Tell us a little bit about yourself and why people should read your esteemed publication, Chris.
Well, I've been a journalist since leaving university, and I started off in Devon on a local newspaper in the.
Which one?
Actually, it was the Timoth and Dawlish Post and
Check
the
it out.
Mid Devon the Totnes and Mid Devon Advertiser.
Oh wow!
So I was kind of in that part of the West Country, and also I covered the Newton Abbot paper, which is where our head office was. So I kind of
My
did that.
goodness, Chris! I was a columnist for the Herald Express in that town. How extraordinary!
Wow.
Yes. Well, welcome. Thank you for joining us. What a brilliant background. I'm among the giants of journalism here. I'm feeling a little bit intimidated. Natasha.donn, of course, lead writer at the Portugal Resident, amazingly experienced and with a similar backstory. Proper journalists. I'm in a proper journalist sandwich this morning. And you've chosen the continuing stress at the border coming into Portugal. Waiting times at Lisbon have more than quadrupled, Chris. Actually, I'll come back to the essential business after we've talked about the news headlines because people need to know about that. I was distracted by your Devon connections. But why this one, Chris? You're joining us. We're taking a look at a news story each. This continues to be a problem, does it not?
Well, I think it does, and it's difficult to know who really is to blame about this, because look. When you go to the airport, and I've been through the airport various times this year and last, what you notice is some of the machines, these EES electronic machines, they're not working. Now, whether this is down to the Portuguese or whether this is down to an overall system failure is unclear. But I can tell you that they've had problems in Greece. I can tell you they've had problems in Liverpool at that airport. I can tell you that they have had problems at both Milan airports in Italy.
Yeah.
So this is not an isolated case. Now, obviously, we know that Lisbon Airport is up to capacity. It's been up to passenger capacity for years. So the more passenger through flow that you've got, particularly at peak times, the longer it takes for people to go through these electronic systems. But when they work, the electronic systems are great. I mean, when I come back from the UK, having spent Christmas there, and I pass through, it's just so much easier than having to stand in a queue and wait for the guy, in the booth, in the security booth.
Hand gesture, yes.
Exactly.
Yes.
And I don't have a problem with it, but I have noticed that particularly elderly people that are kind of over 60, they do have problems with it. They're not sure how they put the passport in the wrong way, or they don't quite get it right, or when the automatic doors open because they've got lots of suitcases, they can't quite get in there quickly enough.
Yes.
And so you've got to kind of time it just right. So I can understand that there are teething problems. But what's interesting is that in the last few days, the Association of Algarve Hoteliers has actually written a letter to Luis Montenegro, the Prime Minister of Portugal, asking him to suspend the system over the period for the holidays for 3 months, with an extension for 90 days, if possible, until things are sorted out. But I actually can't see how things can get sorted out, and I'll tell you why. It's simply because Lisbon Airport is just too small. They haven't got space to put enough of these machines in. That is the issue. And, is the government really going to invest more money in this when it's already planning a new airport? I don't see this getting solved anytime soon. And the problem is it gives a really bad image for Portugal.
Well, when you see on social media people who are live streaming having stood in a queue for 3 hours, and these same
3 hours, 6 hours,
6 hours, like the people you're talking about, 60 plus, and they don't want to move, they want to leave the queue because they'll lose their place. It's inhumane, isn't it? It's the disgraceful treatment of people of any age, but especially the vulnerable.
Well, it is, and if it's interesting when you look at I went to Ryanair this morning and looked at the comments that people were leaving, and it was interesting. You had Portuguese people and English people saying, "Well, it's Brexit's fault. If people if people hadn't chosen Brexit, they wouldn't have
Yeah.
to stand in these queues for us. They wouldn't have all these problems because it seems to affect principally people transferring, from one country to another. For example, if they're going from the States maybe to Angola or, somewhere like that, people are missing flights or they're having huge delays. So there seems to be a big problem there. And it seems to be affecting, Brits, obviously, and Americans. And I
Yeah.
remember there's a leading light of the American club, Sherry Mitchell. And now she has a luxury boutique kind of travel company where she curates wonderful, experienced holidays for small groups of very high net worth individuals.
Ooh.
And she says that her kind of customers all the time are being stuck in this situation. And she said, when you've got Americans that are paying 5,000 or 6,000 euros to stay in the best hotels, to have a personal talk with a government minister, past or present, completely curated experience, often involving a past US ambassador as well.
Good Lord.
And they're being held up for hours at the airport. She says it's awful. And there was another case. I remember we wrote about it in Essential Business, where the stress was so high in the queues that a fight broke out.
Yeah, it happens, doesn't it?
Yeah, there were actual fisticuffs because people so nervous about losing their flight.
Yeah.
But listen, it could be worse because I have to say, in Milan, 500 people lost their flights last month.
Yeah.
500 passengers, and that is official data. I don't think we're anywhere near that. I
Chris,
think
you started with this, like, who's to blame? Who is to blame then, do you think? Who could do something about it?
I think it's a mixture of things. I think initially there were teething problems with the electronic system itself, but those have been ironed out. But I think part of the problem is that, there weren't enough staff on hand in the immigration service at the airport. But, the government says that's now been solved. So is it a question of training? I still think the problem is the Portuguese authorities don't know how to service and use the machines. The machines are quite complex. There's a lot of parts to them. And I think if they go wrong, if you pass through Terminal 2, okay, which I call the cowshed.
Yes.
The cowshed looks like a cowshed.
It does.
If you pass through that terminal, yes, if you pass through Terminal 2, there are loads of kind of machines that are kind of still in their polythene bags that have never been.
Well, these are the machines. They are daunting to look at. And as you say, Chris, Portugal may follow Italy, Greece, and Liverpool. And the rumours that people stole them in Liverpool is not true. That's a terrible thing to say. I think it's probably Liverpudlian common sense and groundedness as saying, no, we're not putting up with this nonsense. And quick to AI. This was probably someone standing in the queue for 3 hours was able to go to their AI and create this meme, arriving at Lisbon Airport Border Control, leaving Lisbon Airport Border Control after waiting an unnecessary amount of hours. That man's grown a full beard, if you can't see that on your screen there.
Yes, I see that.
Natasha, you've got a comment about this as well.
I think it's a big problem, and I think obviously the authorities need to work harder on this.
For sure.
It's a question of training. I think I'm sure they must have training courses for the border staff to use the machines, to deal with the machines. But I just think it's the perfect storm.
We can't confirm or deny any training at the moment. I think Seth, IMA now have got their own problems, and this is just another one of them. Natasha, I'm sure you've got a view on this.
A view on what's going on? Well, I think it's a combination. Exactly, like Chris says, it's this multi-layered sort of incompetence, and in a way, it was wrong of the EU to even think of introducing this system without presumably doing any kind of checking that airports, major airports, and particularly that in countries that depend for their on their economies are based on tourism, like Portugal, presumably like Greece. They should have checked that they could take on this system, because it's very complex, and you've got to take your fingerprints and your photographs and all of that. And I'm sure no checking took place. Or in the case of Portugal, Portugal probably said, yes, we can do it, because they say that kind of thing, and of course aren't able. So it's multi-layered. But I think we've got enough impositions from Brussels as it is, and this one is meant to make everything more secure. Well, of course, it's very secure, because we're not letting anybody in.
Apparently, that's actually not true, because the number of illegal immigrants that are coming in, supposedly for a holiday from all over the world, particularly from Bangladesh and Pakistan, is feeding into part of the problem. There's just so many people
because it's holding everything up.
Yeah, it's holding everything up. And this is part of the problem. And, any country, has to have an immigration policy. I mean, you can't just let everybody in as much as you want to. I don't think the Portuguese authorities have the manpower, they have the will or the discipline or the organization to really deal with this problem. And it's not a problem just localized to Portugal.
Correct.
It's a problem that's affected many, many countries.
Yep.
But the problem is Portugal, the infrastructure of Portugal airport is antiquated, it's out of date. That airport, we do need a new airport.
It's terrible. It's like being in a tube station. It's not like an airport. But you see, the problem is, because we're all talking about this, and because of ultimately what will happen probably is that we do suspend this system yet again for the holiday period, is because we've made such a big song and dance about it. All the people who want to come here illegally will think, great, well, let's get there before September.
Or the holiday season. So if the Algarve Tourism Association is successful in speaking to the Prime Minister to suspend it for the summer, that's a really good time for miscreants and ne'er-do-wells to enter the country. And they I
think it is, because I wonder how much these people really know about these things in places like Bangladesh, or whether it's really that premeditated. But yes, certainly the chaos. It just adds to the chaos. So I think it's just a perfect storm. I think it's just one thing accumulated after the other. Yeah. And, it's just interesting when you read all the comments. I mean, some people are saying, it's the UK's price they have to pay for Brexit.
Just like the bad weather.
Other Portuguese and Brits have been saying, well, it's mostly affecting cheapskate Ryanair flyers.
Oh, my goodness, right. That's not true, though, is it?
No, of course it's not true.
No.
And they're saying these are not the kind of passengers Portugal wants anyway. So there's sort of nasty things coming out here.
No, that's like shooting the other foot.
Yes, if as a cheapskate Ryanair user myself who flew back from Italy recently, I had the most wonderful experience. But you're right, it's about volume. If 3 long-haul flights arrive at the same time on a Monday morning, that's when you're going to have one of those terrible queues. Other times, you're just walking through, not a problem.
Exactly. If you come in the evening, you're normally all right.
Exactly.
Yeah, absolutely. Great day, Chris.
Other people have taken the opportunity as well to say, well, it's not just there. The nightmare doesn't end there. There are situations, particularly with Ryanair, when you can be stuck on the tarmac in the plane for 45 minutes to an hour before you even take off. Yes. And it's absolutely ridiculous when the average flight to any European country within Ryanair's sphere takes about 1 hour, 20 minutes. You're stuck one way or another at some part of the processing at Lisbon Airport for two hours and a half on average.
Yeah. Well, maybe use the roads, the excellent European roads, apart from the price of fuel, or maybe use the wonderful international rail system. Oh, it's not built just yet, but we'll soon be able to go from Lisbon to Milan, which I think was Madrid, I beg your pardon, which I think, although Lisbon to Milan, that sounds like quite a good train journey. It's a bit like when you talk to Portuguese people about something, you say, that's a bit like the airport, isn't it? I've been hearing about this for the last 40 years. Well,
exactly.
Go on, Natasha.
Yeah, well, exactly, because I mean, the fact is, we're talking about this airport is going to be built, Chris, but has anything moved forwards?
Well, no, the earthworks have started over at Alcochete. They have. They
have started what? What are they doing?
Well, they have to landscape the place. They have to level it out. They have to dig it out.
Well, that is something then.
That's already, they've started this.
Good, because you see, I got the impression there was still an enormous push in the industry to get Montijo used as a kind of fallback while they're taking these X number of years to get the new airport built in Alcochete, because I think there's still an enormous push to start using Montijo.
That won't happen, because I actually spoke to the Minister of Infrastructure actually only earlier this year. And I asked them about this question. I asked them 2 questions. I said, why, when you have spent millions over the last 10 years improving the existing Lisbon airport, putting in new shops, making it look really international, creating more gates, why, when you've spent all that, are you now going to close down the airport, eventually phase it out and close it down? Why not keep 2 airports? Because after all, most European cities have at least 2 airports. Virtually all of them have airports. Yes. Why not keep it? You could keep that one for, say, Ryanair, and the main one for the large flyers. The international, the big guys, and keep the low costs at Lisbon. And he said, no, because the new airport will be so big and efficient that it will be able to deal with more than enough planes and passengers. And I said, no, it's not. I said, it's because you've made deals with the landowners, because you want to sell the land, because it's profitable to put new housing or developments. It's for development, isn't it? I mean, that's the truth of it.
There we go. Some proper journalism. Young people. That's how you do it. That's how you push back with the government minister. And what did he say, Chris?
He said he said it was economy of scale and numbers. He said the new airport will be able to deal with a lot of people, huge numbers of passengers, much more than it's currently dealing now, like 3 times the amount.
Yes.
And he also said that we don't want an airport right in the middle of the city. I said, but you're putting it in Alcochete. I said, and already house prices are booming around there, and they're building and building. Yeah. I said, so it's going to be in the city anyway, because Lisbon is going to expand over the next 10 years. And it's the only place it can expand to is on the South Bank. So, it's going to be the same problem, isn't it?
Very good, Chris. What a great debut. We've talked a lot about the airport there, but quite rightly so. It's a massive international perception issue for Portugal. So quite rightly so. Great choice there. We'll move on now to Natasha's pick for today, involving brother-in-laws and a PJ, one of the arms of the police force here, a police swoop. What's going on here, Natasha?
Well, the only reason I picked this was actually for what was happening afterwards. It's basically just another PJ investigation into corruption, the kind of old boys' neck corruption. So this corruption alleged is that a group of companies have been manipulating the public tender process for hiring firefighter aircraft for the wildfires. I mean, this is nothing new, is it, Chris? This has been happening for the last 30 or 40 years. These suspicions of corruption in all the public tenders for firefighting means during the fires. So there's nothing new here at all. The only thing that is interesting for me was that the government that has just recently taken on this sort of social media tool called NewsWhip that is meant to allow it to react instantly to any negative publicity. The government minister, whose brother-in-law is now one of the defendants in this case, immediately took to the press to say it was outrageous that he should be connected to this just because it was one of his family members and that he had nothing to do with it. And he made, in my perception, he made such a tit of himself coming out like that, because he should have literally had the good grace to say, if he said anything at all, to say, well, yes, it does seem to be that my brother-in-law is connected with this, but let's justice do its course. My brother-in-law is a fantastic businessman. He's made, a fortune of, I think it's 450 million from being a boy growing up in Benfica who sold apples and pears. I mean, this man is an extraordinary businessman. So instead of saying it's got nothing to do with me, and of course, in the case of, it's got nothing to do with me, of course, it made me look straight away into perhaps it didn't have anything to do with him. And then I discovered that he actually was the director of operations of one of these helicopter companies that is. So in other words, it has Gesticopter. Exactly. Yes. So it has got something to do with him, albeit he may not have had anything to do with any potential, fiddling with public tender processes. But the fact that he immediately came on, it looked to me so tacky, because if your in-law was in any way, your brother or your sister's husband or wife was suddenly implicated in an investigation, the first thing you do is just say, look, she's my brother wife. I hope the best for her because she's a fantastic person. I've got nothing to do with this, and I have recused myself from all decisions on helicopters, but I just hope for the best. But no, it's immediately all about me. So this man, for me, gets, if we could give somebody, the Rotten Potatoes Award for the week, he gets it on his head.
This week's Rotten Potato Award goes to
exactly. What an idiot! What an idiot!
I think this is they need to be trained actually in order to know how to deal with the media and say what's necessary, because less is more. And this is a case where he's kind of felt on the defensive and blustered and said too much, or what he has said has made it worse.
Exactly.
He probably isn't implicated, to be honest. I don't probably think he is.
Probably not.
But he hasn't treated this as a profession. The problem is a lot of these people that go into public life, they're not trained in diplomatic skills. They're not trained in how to speak to the media often. And this is a case of a guy that obviously got flustered and nervous and felt that he was on the back foot. And he probably is completely innocent, but they just...
Chris, if you think about it, these are people right at the head of government. And we're seeing so many cases where they all seem to shoot themselves in the foot all the time. I don't know if you noticed, but Marco Rubio has given an interview somewhere. I've got to look at it today because it's not on our website yet.
Was it about the plane?
No, he said how marvelous it was that Portugal never raised any problems to the US using large airbase for the Middle East. Well, of course, Portugal had been saying at home, well, we keep telling the Americans we're not happy with this, we're not happy with that. Rubio's just blown their cover. Dear. Again, they say all these stupid things. And when you think that we're in this world where social media is meaning so much, you would have thought that they would have better advice. If they are, as you say, taken by surprise or flustered, they need somebody, what do you call them? Spin doctors? They need somebody to tell them what to do.
Communication.
Well, they do. They really do. It's very badly managed. And in some cases, I was reading actually over the last couple of weeks that, and the Portuguese press were complaining about this, that at certain, press gatherings and meetings, they weren't allowed to ask questions. The press were not allowed to ask questions.
They are often not. Yeah, it's a disgrace.
We're
meant to be this open democratic country. And the Prime Minister, I wrote a story the other day saying that this is a government that's comfortable now with not allowing questions, which is very bad.
Yes, exactly.
It's very bad.
And you think they might be able to ask a relative who works in the media about this, right? Because that's probably the case. They could speak to their sister-in-law who works for the main TV news channel. But anyway, yes,
Exactly.
our recommendation, as well as the Rotten Potato Award of the Week, which I think we should carry forward, is also to get some media training and, to fess up or to say, and it would endear politicians to the public, wouldn't it, to say, I know this looks bad. I welcome a full inquiry. And, I will give a press conference on this and you'll get to ask the questions you want to ask. That's what you want to see, isn't it, in public life? Let's move on then. Thank you very much. We've got the continued chaos at the airport. We've got brother-in-laws here of key minister target of a PJ police swoop here, whereby Natasha has been able to give a Rotten Potato Award. Perfect. My pick for the week is, how do you get more bobbies on the street? This is another one of your articles. By the way, seasoned journalists, when did articles start getting called stories in the media? They weren't
forever.
They always called stories.
They were always called stories.
Oh, okay, fair enough.
When I was a journalist,
when I started, because I started on something called the Ballerman Tooting News, which had my family in hysterics the whole time, because they just thought it was the funniest sounding newspaper. But when I started at the Ballerman Tooting News, the editor said to me, "Well, Tasha, you must never let the facts get in the way of the story." That was his, never let the facts get in the way of the story. This is the story, and I want you to, write about it, whether the facts said it wasn't or not. And it was quite funny because so they were talking about stories then, and I'm talking now, I hate to say it, 50 years ago, because I started.
I thought it was a new thing.
50 years ago.
Yeah, 50. Well, I started at 17 on the Ballerman Tooting News.
That's young, Natasha.
I know. Well, unfortunately, I tell you what it was. I was doing indentures. It was called indentures. So you do a 3-year thing and then you do your proficiency test.
That's
right.
I
was really awful at school. They hated me. So what they did is they pushed me through really fast. So I did my GCSEs really young. Then I did my A-levels young and they just got rid of me.
You were very clever.
No, I was awful. I was called a bad influence.
Yes, and now gifted and talented by today's standards, I suspect. Let's have a look at this. We look at you now, though. Look, you're writing stories like this, and I guess I will defer to this idea of them being stories. I didn't realize I thought it was a modern invention, but here we go. Natasha's story here. My question is, how? And this article is a solution to it. How do you get more bobbies on the streets? Well, you just close their police stations. Nowhere to go.
Well, you pay them more. You pay them more because one of the problem is why would you in Portugal? I have a friend called Andre who is a policeman. He's a regular Piaggio policeman, and he talks to me about this sometimes. And he says, "Why on earth would you want to put your life on the line? For a take-home salary of about 1,200 euros per month."
Seriously,
and it's not just that, Chris. If they rip their uniform,
really?
If they rip their uniform, let's say climbing over a fence to catch a felon, they have to mend it themselves or pay for the mending themselves. They don't get it paid. They don't get it mended by the government. If they're chasing someone and they knock out a light of their car, they have to pay for it out of their salary. It's a disgrace.
It is. I've heard about this buying your own uniform thing, and they're
I'm
not
repairing it.
Well, this then will be another blow to morale. You can't even go and eat a donut in peace, or a bola de belém, obviously here in Portugal, and sit inside a leaky old police station that you once had as a refuge. You're constantly on the beat. That's not going to be good for morale, is it? Here, and also,
I think we do need more police on the street.
No
I mean,
question.
I had a police station here. And was squadro here by my house. And, there were 2 policemen that used to kind of walk around and they would chat with the neighbors. They, it was like a thing. They closed that down. Yeah. And, they're doing it more and more. And it's frightening because you don't feel protected. And then the other thing that really gets me is that often you go to some kind of event and it's not even a demonstration particularly. Sometimes it can be a demonstration. For example, I live by the Social Security building, the Ministry of Social Security. And sometimes they have kind of like Bloc Esquerda, the Communist Party people, They gather together, and there's never more than about 30 or 40 people there chanting. And you count the number of police, and it's like 10 or 12 policemen, and you think, are you serious?
Yeah.
10 or 12 people to control these mostly over 50s people standing in front of a ministry. I mean, really? And it's not just that, it's lots of events. You see far too many police where they don't need to be, instead of being where they need to be.
Vice versa. There are other situations where you think, I think they were caught out recently, weren't they? A big, immigration march where there weren't enough police, it would appear. But a little bit patchy. However, from another angle, there are promises of more police officers on the streets, are there not? But the GNR chief has warned against it, I think. And this is like the ICE situation in the United States, isn't it? Where by drafting in lots more personnel and suddenly, it would appear you're lowering the criteria for entry. And I think that's what's being warned about here. This is one of yours as well, Natasha. A GNR Lieutenant General says a third of all candidates might fail the psych test, or they already do. What's the background here? That we might get more...
What I was trying to say here was that he was just saying the Prime Minister shouldn't have promised so many new police, because what he was trying to say is that let's say we get an entry of 500 or so who are training, but he said they then have to go on for a year of practice, or I don't know what they call it, they're not complete police officers, they're trainees, exactly. Yeah. And in that year, he says, quite a few of them fail their psychological testing, and so they won't become police. So in other words, for the Prime Minister to have done, it's typical what he keeps doing these days. He keeps holding these announcements where, as Chris has mentioned, he doesn't allow anyone to question him ever. So he's always, promising these marvelous things. And in this case, he promised 400 new policemen for both Porto and Lisbon, something that the ASPP, which is the kind of syndicate of PSP police, says doesn't make sense. And now we've got the GNR, which is the other type of police, which is more for the rural areas, explaining one of the pitfalls of promising, because you can train X number of people, but it doesn't mean they'll all make it. They won't all make the grade.
Well, that's the Italian piece saying, isn't it? Last intake, between 550 and 600 candidates failed these psychological tests, high failure rate, which is good in a way, isn't it? That not everybody who goes for it is accepted, and a third do fail. But it doesn't. Well,
I mean, if you think about what's been going on in Lisbon and the number of people that have been sharing these ghastly videos of what they get up to, you do worry about the ones that have passed the psych tests.
Well, yes, you do, don't you? So we want more pay and better minds on the job, don't we? And more moral, upstanding characters to be in the role and being better paid for it. Let's leave it there this week. It's been great to have you on board, Chris. I hope you'll come back from time to time and join us again.
Yeah, sure. It was a bit rushed. I had a busy day yesterday, so I really just got up this morning and kind of prepared.
Oh no, you did great, Chris. Don't worry. I mean, I take my dogs to the beach and get here, by the skin of my teeth.
We're all hearing about the backstory here now, aren't we? Everybody thought this was thoroughly well researched. We were up hours together through the night looking at.
Well, we were, because I have to confess, I'm normally writing about business stories.
Yeah.
So when I suddenly thought about this, and I thought, no, I've kind of got to write about what's important to the expat community and the Portuguese community who like to hear our opinions.
Actually, business stories are still interesting,
Well, maybe next time I'll do a business story. Because
tell us about could you sell essential business to us before we conclude this?
Well, it's very difficult to sell it because I'm the only person that's doing it, really. Literally, it's just me. And, on the editorial side, and we desperately need funding and modernization and technology. I mean, really is what we need. But anyway, look, my aim is to try and choose a broad side of various stories that I think might be of interest to potential investors, or interestingly enough, I think it's like 60% of our readers are actually Portuguese, which is quite interesting.
Wow,
Yeah, it is interesting.
that's interesting.
So, but I've kind of changed the format a little bit just in the last year, because I've realized that what people really are interested in this country, particularly investors and foreigners, is property and tourism. That's really the two. They're just interested in houses. I mean, I've noticed, if I publish a story about property, I get a lot more clicks on that
Yeah.
story than if I publish a story about, say, I don't know, EDP,
Yeah, for sure.
or Galp, or any number of Portuguese companies. So we're living in a world where people are looking at I suppose it's because they can get all this news on Bloomberg and Reuters, so that they go there first. If
I
people are
think,
really
what would be really interesting, Chris, would be if you could have some kind of idea on when this bubble is going to burst.
I don't think it will, sincerely. I've spoken to hundreds of people about this over the last 2 years. And the simple, I think what it will do is plateau.
Right.
I think it's already starting to plateau. If you look at some of the stories I've been publishing just over the last 2-3 months, there is an indication of a slowdown, but not a contraction exactly.
But what happens when the cost of living goes up so much that people can't afford to pay their mortgages anymore, which is what the Bank of Portugal is beginning to react to today?
But that's not, that's true, but that's not, we've got to make a distinction between people that are buying properties here to rent out or to invest.
Right.
Or for themselves, high net worth individuals or affluent people that are coming here to buy property, and there is no sign of that being a problem. If anything, there's not enough property to cater to them right now. Most of it's been bought.
Yeah.
So that's, I mean, like in Faro, I published a story. You probably read it, Natasha. I published a story about in Faro that if you're an investor and you want to buy a house and you want to spend, up 500,000 or over, you're going to have a problem finding places in Faro now, because the availability, the stock of good quality property that are tailored for those kind of people has plummeted by 17% just in the last couple of months. So basically, everyone's snapping these properties up, and there aren't enough new properties being built, and there isn't enough turnover. So that is the problem. So Faro seems to be interesting. I was so amazed, and also with the traffic as well, with the cars. People, that was another thing.
I spoke to a Richard Walker, who's a specialist on the modernist architecture of Faro, who calls it the Palm Springs of the Algarve of Portugal. So maybe that's part of it. It's the Palm Springs, everybody. That interview will be out on Wednesday of next week, alongside the opening of Richard's new exhibition in Faro. Once you scratch the surface and understand the context of modernist architecture, it makes a whole big difference. I found it fascinating talking to him. Chris, great job. How do people find out more about Essential Business? Well, how can they see your website?
We're www.essential with a T dash business .pt. Okay, .pt. And most of the stories are published on LinkedIn as well.
Great.
So we have a newsletter three times a week. We have a magazine, advertising willing, that comes out, and but as I said, I'm just one person. I can only do so much. I only actually work on it 3 days a week. So,
Well, thanks for doing what you do. People can find it at essential-business.pt. Great debut with us here on the Three-Handed Resident Podcast News Review, live every Friday morning at 9:15 and available thereafter on the Resident YouTube site. Have a great weekend, both of you, and thanks to everybody.
Thank you for inviting me.
Bye-bye, Chris. Ciao. Ciao, ciao.
Ciao, ciao.